This is the video for lesson 7.4. We're going to continue to look at the quadratic formula, and we're going to try and solve quadratics by using that formula, but we're going to do some questions that are slightly more difficult. Now, for my warm-up, I noticed a few people are still struggling at the end of the formula once they've got to this stage what to actually do. So I just want to remind them that you actually split these into two. With the addition, 5 add 1 is 6, divide by 2 is 3. 5 minus 1 is 4, divide by 2 is 2. And sometimes you end up with fractions, so like 3 add 11 is 14, divided by 4 doesn't particularly work, or you'll get a decimal, so 14 divided by 4 is 3.5. So you can also use your fraction to decimal button and it will change it for you, or you could just use your fraction button to begin with, 14 over 4, and it will give you 7 over 2. So that's something that can be kind of useful, particularly once we get to lesson 6 and lesson 7 in this. We're going to be wanting fractions for our questions, not decimals. Question 4 I threw in because it wasn't equal to 0, so that's always a good one to practice. So doing opposites here, if I take away 48 from both sides, 48 take away 48 is 0, and then I have my regular order question. No method here. Some people try to do quadratic formula. You can certainly do that. Or if you can quickly think of two numbers at times to make 48 and subtract to make 2, you can do 8 and 6 as well. And that was one of the key questions. Which method am I supposed to use? Am I supposed to factor, or am I supposed to use a quadratic formula? If you can factor, I would recommend you factor because it's a lot quicker. You can use the quadratic formula for every question, but it will take a little bit longer to do. Now I want to pause the video at this point, but these are the steps that we found from our previous lesson. The last question of the homework, I actually have the solution here just to talk through because I know some people found that one more difficult. So check it's equal to 0, it is. Write down your a, b, and c, making sure you pick up signs here as well. So -6, -5. Always write down the formula. A lot of people chose not to do that and did not do as well on these questions. Plug in the numbers, but very importantly, make sure you're plugging every number in using parentheses. As I come to simplify this, 2 negatives make a positive. If you type this in, you get 169, and the square root of 169 is 13, and 2 times 6 is 12. As you're working the question out, 5 add 13 is 18. You can simplify 18 over 12. 5 minus 13 is -8, and you can simplify -8 over 12 as well. Now, there was only one new question for this lesson. And the new question is, what if you can't factor? What if you try to factor and it doesn't work? Well, that's why really we need the quadratic formula. All those questions I gave you last lesson were ones you didn't really need the formula for, but it was to practice with nice questions. Now, you can't tell just by looking at this that something strange is going to happen. So let's follow the steps. Let's make sure it equals 0. It does. I'm going to write down my a, b, and c. I'm going to write down my quadratic formula. Now I've got to that stage, I can obviously scroll up a little bit. I'm going to substitute, and every time I'm going to use my parentheses. The negative of -7 is +7, and 2 times 3 is 6. So I'm going to write that part down for starters. And then this part here, this is where I'm going to use my calculator just so you can see what starts to happen here. So I got -7 squared minus 4 times 3 times -4. I'm just literally typing this in, but without the square root. 97. Now, I don't know the square root of 97 off the top of my head. I know the square root of 100 is 10, so I'm getting a little suspect about this one, so let's try it. We don't get a nice number. Last time we actually had questions that worked very nicely, and then we could continue. So for this question, actually, you can stop at that point. When we got the square root of 97, if it doesn't work nicely, you can actually just leave your answer as the square root of 97. In a later unit, we will talk about simplifying some radicals, although this one I don't believe simplifies anyway. If you do want decimals, you could work out the square root of 97 like I did on the calculator, and you need to do the rest on using your calculator as well. What is 7 add that number that I saw over here? What is 7 add 9.84885782? And then divide by 6. And I'm choosing to round to 2 decimal places. It doesn't specifically say in the question what degree of accuracy is needed, but just take care when you're rounding numbers as well. Make sure if it is 2 decimal places, that third number should be 5 or less. If it's not, you should be adding 1 onto that decimal from something you did in middle school. And that's the main difference between these questions. In some ways they're actually easier because you get a number, you try and do a square root, you get the huge long decimal, and then we're just going to stop at that point. And now you should be able to try the worksheet that's associated with this exercise.